You ready?
Mm-hmm.
I said no.
Well, don't poke me then.
I didn't poke you. You poked me. Don't poke me. Don't pretend to poke me. This is Lizzie. She's seen better days. Her head's a little mangled. I don't know. You expect me to remember these things? I don't remember.
Don't get frisky with me.
Whoop! Hello everyone and welcome back to Foster the Meeple, a channel all about
Board games.
And
board gamey things.
Exactly. We are here today to do a video about easy teaches. Now, here's the first thing to say. This could be very subjective.
Very subjective.
The thing is, for us, we approached this list in a way that we were like, these are games that we have maybe taught to non-gamers that we found it's relatively easy. They may have a simpler rule set, but one of those things where it's like easy to learn, hard to master. So maybe a simple rule set, but not a super light game. Some of them are super light games. There's a mixture of everything. But I think at the end of the day, these are games that we find relatively easy to teach to newish people.
And again, you might disagree, and that's fine.
You will probably disagree with some stuff.
But we have taught most of these games to non-gamers
with great
or
success.
gamers alike with great success, and that's why they're on the list.
Yeah. And it's our list.
It is our list.
So you're just going to have to deal with it.
C'est la vie.
C'est la vie. So we do have two honorable mentions. The first one I'm going to let Jeff talk about because this is a game that he teaches all the time. It's probably your most teached game, your most taught game.
Definitely. The first honorable
it's a honorable
mention is Res Arcana.
Mm-hmm.
I have taught Res Arcana to, as Jamie mentioned, many people. Many different types of gamers across the gaming spectrum, from gamers that are deep into the hobby, have never played a game before, or somewhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
And every time it's been a resounding success. I think that in most cases with this teach, it is relatively straightforward to play this game, given how well I know this game now. And again, I understand that is subjective to the teacher.
That's why it's an honorable mention.
I know this game so well that in most cases, any iconography questions or nuance or anything that comes up, I am able to answer and we can move forward. But I think even if you didn't know the game to the degree that I perhaps know the game, it's not overly complicated. Most of the iconography are relatively straightforward. It will say, tap a card to do a thing. And in most cases, that's collect resources. I think Res Arcana is kind of maybe a bit more on the fringe of like easy teach, but I do not think it's complicated, and maybe I'm biased, but I've, again, taught Res Arcana to people that have never played games before, and they caught on very quickly. So I think it was worth at least mentioning.
For sure. Now, the next honorable mention, I'm actually going to mention kind of like a type of game, but we have one that's pretty specific that we want to mention, and that is The Adventures of Robin Hood from Cosmos. And the reason why we didn't end up putting this on the actual list is because you don't teach the game, the game teaches you. And so those can be some of the most easy games to teach because you yourself don't need to know the rules. The reason that we picked this one in particular is because it walks you through literally everything. Set up, turn by turn. Anytime something new comes up, you're going to read something in the book and you are discovering it together as a group or as a duo or whomever. So I think if you are looking to get into board games and teaching board games, and this game could almost teach you how to be a good teacher, honestly, because it literally introduces things step by step. So that's why it's an honorable mention, because technically the onus isn't on you for teaching. The onus is on the game.
And there's some other games that fall into that bucket.
Forgotten Waters and
didn't
Freelancers.
Include.
Even Mansions of Madness.
Mansions was on my list too.
So the first one that I wanted to talk about is Boomerang Australia. This is another game that I feel like we have taught to so many different people. And I feel like, and now I want to be very specific, Boomerang Australia, not Europe or USA, because they are slightly more complex. Boomerang Australia is a relatively basic draft and write type of game. So one thing, its rules are really simple. It's got some mechanics that people are kind of familiar with, like set collection. That's not overly complicated to teach. It has like, you need to get a difference between this number and this number. Perfect. I understand that. You are trying to cover as much of the map as possible. Like, there's really easy concepts in this game that you can teach, and the theme itself is engaging, that people are kind of like wanting to learn. So this is a game that we've taught numerous times and has always been a hit. And I find myself, like, this is a game where if you've played it yourself a couple of times, you would not need to look at the rule book at all. You can just teach it in like under 5 minutes and you're good to go.
Next up, we kind of bucketed a mechanism of games, which is kind of push your luck, but push your luck with like dice primarily. And we chose Strike, Can't Stop, Spots, that kind of genre of just basically rolling dice. There's something therapeutic and easy and feel-goody about just rolling a bunch of dice with a little bit of game around it. I mean, I think in all of these instances, you're basically just rolling dice, trying to get some lucky rolls, and there's just a hint of a game around it. Like in Strike, you're just trying to knock dice out of arena. Can't Stop in Spots, you're just trying to push your luck by rolling dice and getting certain combinations of numbers. Everyone has played with dice or knows dice to some degree.
They played Yahtzee.
And so all of these games are super easy to teach because all of them also don't have a heavy rule set around them. It's just basically roll dice, combo numbers, or just literally, in regards to Strike, throw dice into arena and hope, you know, you get a couple pairs of dice that you get to take. And
people are like relatively familiar with like things like Yahtzee and stuff like that. So you can always start off by saying like, oh, have you played Yahtzee? Okay, this is very similar. And even like I taught Strike to people who enjoyed going to like the casino and gambling. And so like that was something that they caught on to really quickly as well. We haven't taught Spots, but I personally have taught Strike and Can't Stop at like work events to people who've never played board games
We
before.
taught my mom Can't Stop.
That is an excellent.
And my mom has literally never played a board game outside of like Monopoly and Sorry. Has no concept of board games outside of those, has no idea how any of them work, and she caught on in 5 minutes.
Yeah, because they're so easy to teach, and when they're easy to teach, they're often very easy to learn, so that typically goes hand in hand. Okay, so the next one that we wanted to talk about is a game that you can introduce to people if they're wanting to maybe get into racing games.
Or deck building.
This teaches both, and that is The Quest for El Dorado. This is kind of like one of the most pure like racing type of games where you are literally just trying to go from point A to point B, and you have to get there faster than anyone else. So that concept in and of itself, very easy to understand. I know I need to go from here to here. Perfect. Well, how are you doing that? You're doing it by playing out different cards that go along with different types of terrain. When you play that card that matches that terrain, it means you can move through that terrain. There's a few other cards that are going to come up that have different types of ability, but that's kind of like the meat of it. And also like buying cards to add to your hand, which is the deck building aspect. I would probably introduce this game to somebody before I even would introduce Clank, which is kind of like a next step up for deck building. But it's just one of those things where it just feels very welcoming, very simple. The concepts in this game just make sense. And I find that is often when it becomes an easy teach, because if someone's like, yeah, I have a yellow card, and that means I can move through any of the yellow spaces.
I think sometimes the nuance of these games being so simplistic from a strategy standpoint are what's important. Like in Quest for El Dorado, it is literally just, as you pointed out, getting to the end the fastest. There's really nothing else. There's a little bit of strategy in terms of like maybe manipulating the
types of cards
and stuff you purchase, but it's pretty straightforward. There's no nuance in figuring out how to do well in this game, like a Clank or whatever, where there's a bunch of different cards and how they synergize off of each other and you know, tokens to flip up and what have you. It's literally get from point A to point B as fast as you can, and here are all the cards you're going to have available to you. And in most cases, it's just matching card to terrain type in front of you.
Yep.
All right, next up, we have one of our favorites, another one that we have taught to many people.
And your mom.
Yeah, my mom and two good friends who are not board gamers, and that is King Domino. Yeah. King Domino is, in our opinion, probably one of the most simple games to teach because it is literally all about just connecting, similar to Quest for El Dorado. You're basically just trying to match up terrain types.
Yep.
The, I guess, complicated part of King Domino, if you can call it complicated, is just how the math works. Basically being like crowns multiplied by terrain type.
That's the most complicated
adjacency.
part.
And so given that that's the biggest complexity in the game, it's very simple to teach. And it's puzzly enough that I think people enjoy it, even though it's super simplistic.
Yeah.
And it's just one that we've successfully taught numerous times. I think you can basically just put it out on the table and say, hey, we're going to be placing our meeples in order of turn and moving forward and then placing our tile on our map. And all you're realistically trying to do is connect like terrain types.
And people are often very familiar with playing dominoes. So there's some similar mechanics there. So I find that does make a big difference if people have played old school games that relate to those types of things. So yeah. The next one is Cascadia. This is another game that we tend to bring out a lot with new gamers, where it's kind of almost like that little step up a little bit. But once again, it's like you're matching terrain type and you're just trying to achieve some objectives.
And the objectives are global and they're in front of you.
Yes.
So everyone can ask questions. It's like, well, what does this mean again? And it's not hindering the game for you to be like, this is what this means.
Yeah.
It's not impacting other players' turns. It's not impacting the game. It's just, this is what this means.
Yes. Yeah, and it's the rule set is relatively simple. Like you can always play, and what we do with new players is we always play with like the base set of animals, like in terms of like, okay, well the fish need to be in a line. Bears need to be in pairs. Like it's relatively simple objectives. Throughout the game you can get more complicated ones, but you don't need to start with those. So it is just like, these are the objectives. And plus, once again, people are engaged in the theme. They like the way it looks. They like the chunky discs and everything. And so this is just one that we've played so many times with new gamers and introduced if somebody wants to play a board gamey type of game.
Yeah.
And it's an easy teach.
Yeah, I think that those types of games that everything is open information plays well into this kind of list.
Yep.
Where, you know, someone's got their little biome. I can see everything they have. And they could be like, hey, like, I'm just curious about this thing. And them being able to ask that and me being able to see it. It's not like hidden cards where you can't really ask or it would, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which actually plays into the next game on this list for the same reasons. And that is Dice Miner.
She is.
Dice Miner is a dice drafting game where ultimately you are just trying to draft dice off of a communal mountain board. And there's a little bit of rules in terms of what dice you're allowed to draft off of that mountain, but basically you're trying to do a bunch of different things. It's like set collection, runs. It's very Yahtzee-like. You know, you want your white dice to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's some dice that you can like give to other players and you cheers them. If they have like a beer icon on them, you can like give them to other people. It's very simple. All you realistically need to do is teach what each icon does.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're basically playing Yahtzee with a bit of a draft element to it. I wouldn't even call it complexity, but each player has an asymmetrical ability. But what's unique here is that those asymmetrical abilities are all what's already on the dice.
Yeah.
So it's not like a uniqueness to it that would be complicated to maybe new gamers. It's just an additional thing on each player. So one person might already have a
number one
die that they have access to infinitely, regardless of what they draft.
And it's all open.
Yeah,
so everybody can see what you've got. Yeah. So you could just be like, oh, what does this mean? Or what does
just
that
like
mean?
I was saying with Cascadia, like all of this information is public information. So they could be like, okay, wait, remind me again. I need a 1, 2, 3, 4, but what if it's 2, 3, 4? It's like, well, no, it has to start with 1. Like those questions can be asked fluidly and pushes the game forward. So there's not a lot of downtime and what have you, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Next up is another grouping, because we could literally just have a list of all of these games and we would go well beyond 10, 15, 20. So those are like the party-esque type of games. Fun Facts, So Clover, Just One, Monikers, Doodle Dash, Fake Artist Goes to New York. We could go on and on and on. These are, in my opinion, the absolute easiest games to teach people because most people have played some kind of a word game, they've played some kind of a party game, they've played some kind of a drawing game, they've played some kind of a charades game, and the rule sets of these games are intentionally simple because they're meant to be like a welcoming experience regardless of who's around the table. So any of those games, in my opinion, I have had the most success with in terms of teaching new gamers, because it's usually like, hey, here's these rules, and guess what? You don't even need to fully follow them to have fun. Like, how many times have we played So Clover? We don't keep score. I don't even know how to keep score in that game. Like, Fun Facts, like, let's just pull cards and do this thing. Just One, let's just do this. Oh, you've done this part wrong? Who cares? It's kind of like all about engaging people in the learning experience of that game or those games. So anyways, that is a whole subset of games that are, in my opinion, the absolute easiest to teach.
Yeah, those games mean less to me. Monikers maybe somewhat different if playing in like teams or whatever.
Yeah.
But like those games, the points don't matter to me at all.
Like, whose line is it anyway?
Yeah, exactly. It's more so like, what's the conversation going to be like after we do this puzzle?
Yeah. Exactly.
Next up is basically another dice chucker. But this one, I think, of all of these, probably has a little bit more game around it. But it's really luck dependent
it's
and
really
super
simple.
random. And that is Memoir 44. And I've chose Memoir 44. I haven't played the other iterations of this game. Battlelore or
Battle of Westeros.
Battle of Westeros, which I do think get a little bit more complex because there's a little bit more card play. In Memoir 44, you are basically playing out scenarios from World War II. And in those scenarios, you're just placing troops. The board is all set up for you via the game. So basically, you just have to follow all of the placement of the troops on this map that's defined to you by the scenario booklet. And then you're just rolling dice. Those dice have different iconographies on them and what the troops can do, but there's really only a few kind of different things that can happen. It's basically move, attack, and range. That's basically it. There's a little bit of nuance with like, different terrain types that can come on, but everyone has reference cards to explain what all of those things do. And all you need to know is how to roll dice and what those results mean, and you can teach this game.
Yeah. And it's basically, is it a hit or is it not a hit?
Yeah. Did you hit? Yes. Perfect.
Perfect. That person's gone
remove
from
a troop.
the game.
That's really it. Again, if you know how to roll dice and you know how to explain what the 3 or 4 different icon types mean, then you can teach this game relatively quickly and easily.
Yeah. I would say the reason why this is on the list is because like it falls into like the easiest war game could kind of get people into the entry of like, oh, maybe I start with Memoir 44 and then maybe I go to Undaunted and then maybe I go to this and then
that's a fair assessment.
It's kind of like helping people develop the concepts to get up to some of those heavier type of games.
Definitely.
Last 2, I'm going to group them together because in my opinion they have a lot of very like similar types of elements to them, and that is Camel Up and Sheepy Time. So these are both like race, push your luck type of games. So they're both really, really fun, very colorful, but also the rule set very simple. And you can easily teach both of these games in like under 5 minutes. And what's great about them is that part of the teaching experience of these games is the excitement in how you teach them and how you play them. Because you need to like emphasize certain things like the camel up when you put your camels on top of each other, and you get to like, there's a lot of like visuals that come with this, because in like Camel Up, you've got the pyramid, so you can show people how to shake it and how to poop out the dice. And in Sheepy Time, you could take little sheep meeples and be like, and then you're rocketing yourself over the thing. They're once again concepts that people can understand, because I know that I'm just going around this track. I know that in Camel Up, like bidding, like, oh, this is like a race. I am betting on who I think is going to win. So it's just, once again, just concepts that people already kind of understand. And I just think these are easy to teach for me, because they're easy to get excited about, and they're easy to get other people excited about.
I think why Camel Up is on the list for me, on top of everything you said, which I agree with, is like on Camel Up, you do one thing on your turn. Any game that's like you do one thing. Here are your options, but you can only do one of those things. You can roll a dice, you can make a bet. That's basically it. And there's a bunch of different things you can bet on, but you do one of those two things on your turn. And in Sheepy Time, you're just going through a rondelle. You're playing a card and moving those amount of spaces.
The card is it literally tells you, move 2 spaces. Catch 1 Z. That's it.
There's little verbiage things that happen in Sheepy Time. And there's ways you can manipulate the board a little bit, but it's all straightforward stuff. It's like move 4, then do a thing, then your turn's over.
Land on this thing if it has a thing. Do the thing if you want to.
Super, super simple.
Very simple, very straightforward, and fun to teach. Big time fun. So those are some of the games that we believe and that we would recommend as easy teaches, or at least for us from our experience. But we'd love to know down in the comments below, what are some of the games that are your go-to games to teach people? Like, what's the game that you know? Now, obviously, we have a lot of other games that to us, we feel like we can teach really well. But I also find there's sometimes some of those like quote-unquote easy games that aren't easy to teach. Scout and Wind the Film are 2 that I find people struggle with much. Parade, Fuji Flush, because the concepts aren't as normal and straightforward as you would think, even though it's this super simple card game once you know how to play. So I'd be really interested to know down below, what are some of your easy teach recommendations?
I wanted to put Colorado on this list, but I feel like we talked about it a bunch recently. So.
But it could be on the list. I mean, even like Cubitos, I would consider a relatively easy teach. We just taught it literally a couple of days ago. But it does have some nuances in it that, because there's so much variety, some things are easy to forget. Anyways, would love to know. Now, if you're interested in buying board games like any of the many we mentioned today, you should first start by checking your friendly local gaming store. And for us, that is
Boardroom Game Cafe.
Just pretend we've got our mugs. Do you like snacks?
I do.
Perfect. Where can people find them?
Lunch Pack.
Exactly. From all around the world. You'll love to see it. You're going to actually see it
soon
in our June wrap-up video, because we're going to be eating some snacks. If you like what you see,
please subscribe.
We hope to see you again soon. And now we say goodbye. Goodbye.
Later days.
We don't have any brew. I didn't want to go up. It's so hot. Although I did buy iced coffee. Did I tell you?
No.
I got iced caramel macchiato. Mwah. We can have some after this if we wanted to. We could get crazy with it, girl. But we do not. Oh my god, I have a Boardroom Game Cafe t-shirt. Where is that? I gotta wear that in a video. I bought one when I got the same one as one mug too. Anyways,